Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Freedom for All. It's Friday once again, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm Jennifer Ellis here with my wonderful co-host and handsome husband, Mr. James Anthony Ellis.
Hello, world. Are you ready to be free?
Yeah, we have another amazing guest today. I got to say, I'm going to give a little shout-out to RadioGuestList.com because the last few weeks we have had some really awesome guests on this show, thanks to our add-on there. So, want to give them a shout-out.
Yeah, I was excited to read the pitch from our guest. You know, this show talks about freedom in all its different forms, you know, a lot of political freedoms, social freedoms, some of it internal freedoms. And then there's the freedom that pushes it to the nth degree, about almost a sacred or a spiritual freedom. And when I read this man's pitch, I thought of this story I was told by my dad. It comes from a book from, let's see, what year was it? Oh, yeah, 380 B.C., The Republic, by Plato, Greek philosopher. Have you ever heard the story of the allegory of the cave?
I have not.
Would you like to?
Yes.
Now, it's really simple. In the Republic, Plato talks about this cave. It's an allegory of people that are chained to a wall in a cave, and there's a flame or the sun behind them, and all they're able to see, since they're chained to this wall, are shadows against a wall. And that's their reality. The reality is these shadows dancing against the wall, and that's what they, that's how they define their life and reality. And it's the people who can be unchained, go outside the cave, and to see the source of all these shadows and all that, that can really be free. And when I read this man's pitch, I'm like, right on. He's, at least what I gather from this, is like he's really pointing towards true freedom where you're absolutely not attached to this world, although you can live in it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We're really blessed to have him on the show, and I believe that you wanted to do the intro today.
All right. So here we are. Our guest is Rahasya Poe. Like many seekers, Rahasya Poe possesses a mixture of life experiences that brought him full circle with himself. In 2003, he and his wife, Dara, wrote the 12 Spiritual Laws of Recovery and Meditations for the 12-Step Program. Rahasya recently appeared on PBS in the documentary A Wave of Compassion, which focuses on alternative ways to deal with addiction. He and his wife now publish Northern California's Lotus Guide magazine, which takes as its motto, helping to heal the world one community at a time. And it was during interviews for the magazine with cutting-edge thinkers, scientists, and healers such as Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Fred Allen Wolf, Gary Zukav, and Anne McTaggart that he found encouraging words to write the book, which documents some of the science and viewpoints of the neurological and social consequences of belief systems. Great stuff.
Yeah, it's really great to have him on the show. So I'm going to bring him in. I've lived in Northern California for over 10 years, and Lotus Guide is very, very well known and popular there, very well known. So let's welcome him to the show. Are you there?
I am here.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Super. So, we did I say your name right? Rahasya?
Yes, you did.
Oh, awesome.
It usually gets butchered, but that's pretty good.
All right. So, our show's about freedom, and from the pitch, I just really get that you take freedom to the nth degree. You say the first thing we need to do to escape from this prison is to realize that we are in a prison. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, this goes back to actually a story that was talked about by Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was a Russian mystic philosopher, amongst other things. He said the first thing you have to do to escape from prison is to realize that you are in prison. And this is the most difficult thing to do in our society because everything supports the illusion of freedom. But just think about it. I mean, how free are we when you really get down to it? But really, to try to expand on the allegory of Plato just for a second here, one of the curious things is as they're all in the cave, one of them escapes the cave, goes outside, and learns about sunlight and what's causing the shadows, and it opens up a whole other world to him, and he realizes the illusion inside the cave. And when he goes back inside the cave and tries to talk to everybody and explain it to them, he can only use the terminology and the linguistics that was learned from the shadow world. And this is what we're basically up against in this world. When you really start talking about freedom, we're almost stuck with using the terms and the definitions of freedom. And a lot of those terms and definitions really aren't true. And when we get down to it, we just end up supporting this grand illusion.
Yeah. What two-part question for this. How are we in a prison, and how are these freedoms that we think are freedom, how are they not truly free?
Okay, well, give me a freedom that you're talking about.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. Well, now we have free speech zones. If you go to any major kind of demonstration, you'll notice that there's barricades now. And if somebody like a congressman is giving a talk and you go there and your group wants to demonstrate, they have a chain link fence set up, and it's a free speech zone. And you have to be careful not to speak too loud, and you can't go outside of that perimeter. So it's true, we do have free speech, but now it's limited. And this is the problem. It's being taken away from us so gradually. It's like the frog in hot water. It's happening so gradually, and these people are pretty smart too. So that's just one example.
Yeah, we had someone on last week that we talked about the right to bear arms, and it was on the same thing where things are just being taken away slowly and slowly. We lose less and less freedom.
Yep. Well, for instance, we have the right to vote. That's a good right to have, unless, of course, you happen to disagree with the government and end up getting arrested in some kind of a demonstration, and something happens where you have a record. Now they take away your right to vote. So, we could talk about this over and over and over, but I think the thing that got me started down this, really the catalyst of all this, is I really like one-liner quotes. Benjamin Franklin was really good at this, Einstein. And I read a quote by Voltaire that said, if they can make you believe in absurdities, they can make you commit atrocities. And if you're not careful, you can read a quote like that, and it just goes over your head, a curiosity. But it really got me thinking, if that's really true, then what the heck is happening? Like, what causes this? And this is where it gets into the neurological consequences of setting up an absurd belief system. Now, when I say absurd, I'm not saying it's true or false. Keep that in mind. I'm not saying that a virgin birth is true or false. I'm not saying if Muhammad comes back on a horse, if it's true or false. I'm just saying according to everything that we've ever experienced in the history of the world and all common sense, it's absurd. I've never seen a virgin give birth. I've never seen a horse fly. So if I set out to really indoctrinate, and it helps to get kids at a really young age to start doing this before they start thinking, because at that age you can start giving them answers before they start asking questions, and you're also removing a mental construct there that's really important if you're a researcher or a scientist. You've got to ask the right questions. But if you start giving a kid answers before they start asking questions, it sort of nullifies that mental process. And if you can indoctrinate them into believing this, what's going to happen as they grow up is they're going to have to discount all the science of aeronautics, air flight. They're going to have to discount most of the biological information. And by the time they do this, because you have to remember, for a belief to sustain itself, it needs to be believable. We really have to believe this stuff. And to do that, we're going to have to break enough neural synapses that's connecting to all this other information, science information, and even life experiences. You end up, and actually Dr. Andrew Newberg was telling me this. He says we say to these people that they have narrow-minded, they have tunnel vision. He says, well, it's actually true. By the time they cut down their neural synapses enough to believe an absurd belief, they actually cut down their peripheral vision. It actually starts closing their brain down. And then he told me something curious. He says, and it causes brain damage. And I said, but Andrew, don't you have a better neurological term than brain damage? He says, no, it's just brain damage. He says it's atrophy of the brain. It starts to shrink. If you start breaking down enough neural synapses, it actually causes your brain to start to shrink. And he says once that process starts, it's very difficult to stop it, because now you've set up belief systems that are amazing filters, and they filter out anything, no matter how rational, how logical, or how in your face it is. It will filter it out if it doesn't sustain the previously held belief.
Yeah, this totally makes sense, and I can relate in some ways when I'm thinking of times where I've come up to somebody, and maybe a friend, and I might have some intuitions about something. I might have some inside information about something they call conspiracy theories, like certain things that have happened in the past. Well, they're only conspiracy theories because, the truth is not out yet. So what happens is you approach someone and you give them another view of a situation that's not the government's view or the media's view, and they cannot fathom it. It's like their brains they just cannot expand to the place where they could hear anything besides what the media or the government has told them. And isn't that similar to what you're talking about? Their brain can't even go there?
They end up looking at you like a deer in the headlight. And if you notice, you can go back to them a week or two later and ask them about that conversation, and there's hardly anything about it that they remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the problem with when we start talking about freedom. I believe that we're powerful spiritual beings, and that all of these institutions, whether it's religious or political, nationalism, we have been guided down this road to give away our freedoms. And that's actually what caused me to write the first book, The 12 Spiritual Laws of Recovery, because I was doing counseling for adolescents going through drug rehab. And I tell you, they could not resonate, the new kids, they could not resonate with the 12-step program because of the very first step, when you have to give all your power away and say that you are powerless. The kids that are being born, these past couple of generations, they know that they're not powerless. And this might have worked back in the 30s down at the mission with alcoholics, and it still works to some degree with people today. It's not that it's a bad program, but for the new generations, they don't respond well to giving away their power. And that's the reason the first law is what you resist persists. I had an addiction with methamphetamine during the 90s, and I tell you, it was really, really tough. And the only way that I could truly quit without saying, just for today I'm saying no, and that would just drive me to drinking probably, the only way I could really quit was find something that I wanted more than the feeling that I got from speed. And what I found was through meditation a different consciousness, and I knew I couldn't have them both, so I embraced that whole addiction process and used it to transform myself to a completely different level.
That was awesome. Just to complete a circle of thought here before we move on to another maybe line of questioning is, so in speaking of freedom, would you say, I guess what I hear from you is freedom is a sense of detachment and an open-minded curiosity to be aware of other paradigms and other realities. Would you agree, or does that sound right?
Yeah. Yep. That's more of an inner freedom, and that perception again depends upon. I don't think we pay enough attention to how we open our minds and expand our minds, because a lot of what you're saying just now, it is true, but to do that depends upon having an open mind, and not just saying I have an open mind. A lot of people can really, really be deceptive. They'll tell you, yeah, I have an open mind. Tell me what you're talking about. You tell them, you can tell right away that their mind isn't open at all.
Right. You had started to tell us a little bit about your first book, The 12 Spiritual Laws of Recovery and Meditations. I also wanted to ask you about your book, To Believe or Not to Believe.
Yeah, that book, like I say, came about because of the quote from Voltaire, because I wanted to know, why is it that on every battlefield, it doesn't matter what battlefield or what era of time, if you go out there and you start asking the soldiers that are in battle what their beliefs are, you're going to find some pretty outrageous and fanatical belief systems. And if you follow that back, that mindset, once you can convince a person to have this absurd thought, it's that same exact mental neural networking and cognitive process that it takes to convince this person to do things that they wouldn't normally do. This is something else the neuroscientist had explained to me. Using functional MRI, if you get a person that is a really extreme believer in whatever, it doesn't matter what religion or what nationality or what nation or anything that's a little bit absurd and they're extreme at it, and they do a functional MRI and take the brain map, it overlays almost exactly on a person that has been known to do things that they wouldn't normally do. It's almost like it short-circuits the brain. And the governments and states have known this for centuries. They've known way back, probably started right around 300 AD, 325 AD, with the Council of Nicaea, when governments, the state, sort of made an agreement with religions. They said, okay, you don't have to pay taxes, and for you not paying taxes, you need to sanction our wars. And ever since this agreement, these people have been paying attention, extreme attention, to what kind of people can they get to go out there and sacrifice themselves on the battlefield. And inevitably, it's almost always religious extremists. So consequently, this marriage between state and religion has worked out well for both of them. If I'd have to maybe get the definition of well, but it hasn't worked out well for the planet, though.
Yeah. Do you think, I've never heard that concept, and I'm fascinated. Do you think that's why the Founding Fathers wanted in the Constitution a separation of state and religion?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They knew beyond any shadow of a doubt the situation that they came from and the history. I mean, John Locke talks about this, which heavily influenced the Founding Fathers. But they knew for many, 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 many years the kinds of decisions that an extreme religious person can make if they're sitting in Congress, or if those decisions are determined by religious organizations. And I think in today's world we can see that pretty much in our face. All you have to do is turn on the news, and it's most of our wars, even though, and this is curious too, because they might say it's about religion, but it's really not about religion. It's actually about getting other people's resources, undermining their stability, and just basically taking their stuff. But it's easy to make it a holy war or a religious war, because then you get the religious people involved. and these are the people you need to really fuel a war.
Wow. You'd also said in part of your work that, and I'm pointing now towards maybe some sort of sense of solution for us that might feel a little trapped or imprisoned by what we've been taught to believe. You said we need to find someone who has escaped and can help you escape. Spiritual leaders, visionaries, etc. We need to find somebody who's already escaped who can help us escape. Who are we talking about there?
Okay. Well, I was talking to Barbara Marx Hubbard and Bruce Lipton here a while back, and they told me a little analogy that it really rang true for me. They said, you know the analogy of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. We use that metaphor quite a bit for spiritual transformation. They said, but what's interesting about this is, and this is from a biologist point of view telling me this, he says, what's interesting about this is after the caterpillar has almost completely devoured its world, its environment, it eats like hundreds of times its weight, and if it kept that up, it would be a huge monstrosity. But for some unknown reason to the caterpillar, there is something outside of the fields of influence that what we see as reality. Something influences that caterpillar to find a place and hang upside down and spin a cocoon. And inside the cocoon, shortly after it's all spun, if you opened up the cocoon, you would find a chaotic mess of cells. It would just look like a bunch of goo, and it would just drain out, and you would think there's nothing there. But what is happening inside that chaos are something called, this is what biologists call these, it's called imaginative cells. Inside that chaotic mess of cells and molecules is imaginative cells. And they know now by really close research and inspection that these cells are picking up some kind of frequency outside of our dimension possibly, but around those cells there is a vibration, and that vibration starts to reach out and connect, and that's the beginning of manifesting the butterfly that is soon to be. And what that story tells me is the imaginative cells in our world are the visionaries, the people that are standing on a slightly higher plateau and can look a little further over the horizon. And it's only those people that can do that because they don't have the belief filters up. They can see a new world. They can see a new vision, because if you're looking into the future or even into the now through the filters of the past, you're going to filter out all of the needed information, because, and this is my point of view, the world that we're heading towards right now is so uniquely different than anything in our recorded history that if you're looking at it through the filters of the past, you're going to filter out all of the exact information we need to change, because like Einstein said, we're never going to come up with the solutions from the same level of awareness that created the problems. And this is from a genius, and he knew this to be true from his own point of view.
Right.
If we're going to look out there through the eyes of the past, we're always going to be manifesting and creating the past.
Can you name a few people that our audience might know? I mean, are we talking about the Dalai Lama or Tom Cruise or Obama? Who are we talking about?
Well, probably not Obama or Tom Cruise. Unfortunately, I would say people like June Vallow. I don't know if you know him, but Fred Allen Wolf and Bruce Lipton for sure. Bruce Lipton as basically he's changed the whole landscape of biology by having the vision that we aren't determined by our genes. There's always been this saying, nurture against nature, in biology. And he's really changed it because he's shown how the membrane of the cell is what determines what happens on the inside of the cell, and how it determines it is from its environment. And since the environment is strictly energy, and our thoughts and emotions are also energy, he has shown how thoughts and emotions penetrate the walls of the cell and actually change our genetics. So, I mean, that's a visionary for you. And I think anybody's a visionary that can reach out beyond the academic traditional norm. Like, I just did a really interesting interview with John Anthony West, and he's the person that he took Schlemmer's work, which was done in Egypt on the pyramids and on the temples. He went to Egypt and he thought, you know what, the Sphinx has to be older than 4,000 BC. And when he started thinking about it, of course it's 4,000 BC because almost all of the archaeologists were Judeo-Muslim or Christian, and they were still going by the Usher mathematical thing that we were created on January 9th at 9 o'clock, 6,000 years ago. So consequently, almost all of the archaeological finds have been mapped and dated, and it can't be beyond that 4,000 mark. But he is looking at the Sphinx and noticed that the watermarks on the side of the walls were heavily done with torrential rains. And the last torrential rain in that area was 7,000 BC, and it would have taken 1,000 years to even do that. So that's the kind of visionaries I'm talking about, the kind of visionaries that aren't locked into traditional thinking. Because, I mean, look at our world. This is where traditional thinking has brought us. We're getting all of our, Monsanto is taking charge of all of our food. The Federal Reserve is almost bankrupting the whole planet. Governments have just all but collapsed and become dysfunctional and even dangerous. Our world resources are completely depleted. And all of this is happening because of age-old thinking, that there's just an abundance of everything and there's not enough of us to make a difference, but there is. And the population is growing exponentially at this point. So we have to get anybody that can think out of that paradigm. I would say those people are a visionary. And you have to be brave, because you're going to be going up against the system. But if you look back in history, I mean, it's never the quiet people that are making the history books. It's the people that we've burned at the stake. It's the people that we've hung, crucified. It's these people that break out of the tradition, that takes the evolution to another level.
Exactly. And we only have less than a minute left, so I want to make sure you get to give out your website.
Sure. Yeah, the best way to do is you can go to our magazine website, which is www.lotusguide.com, LOTUSGUIDE.com. And my personal website, rahasyapoe.com, is RAHASYAPOE.com. And, of course, and my email is rahasya@usa.com.
Thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. It's amazing information that you had to share. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And everyone join us next week again, Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for Freedom for All Radio.